Again, I am not very experienced at this, so I don't even remember if this stuff makes it into the stream or not. But in case it does, welcome to Advent of Code 2022 Day 4. I've made some changes to the stream. Rather than having a 10-second delay that's always a 10-second delay, I'm going to experiment with something new where I stream with a 1-minute delay while solving the problem, so I won't be able to interact with chat really at all, because I shouldn't be, just for the sake of the competition and in case people are watching the stream, just to preserve the leaderboard. But then I'll remove the delay afterwards when going over the problem. I'm going to repeat this again in case I'm going live in a few seconds. Okay. Alright, now I think the stream is live. So, welcome back to Advent of Code 2022. We're here for day 4, and I've made some changes to the stream. Since there's actually people watching, which thank you, I really appreciate people actually stopping by and watching the stream. Let me know in the comments or the chat, I guess, how you found it, because I'm curious. I mean, I guess I've tweeted stuff out, but I don't really have too many followers on Twitter. But yeah, basically, while I'm solving the problems, I'm going to be streaming with a full 1-minute delay. So the stuff that you're seeing live is actually 1 minute in the past. That's just to make it so that if I happen to be on the leaderboard pretty fast, it's a little harder to just copy stuff and submit it, just to, you know, preserve some of the competitive integrity. But then I think I've played around with OBS enough to know how to make it so that when I'm done solving, I can keep the same stream going, but make the delay go down to 0. And I'll go through the problems pretty in depth, I think, with 0 delay. That'll make it easier to interact with chat and answer some questions and stuff. But also has the benefits of making it so, you know, I don't have to split this into 2 broadcasts, and also, yeah, I can stream the original competitive part of the day with some delay. Previously, when I used to stream on Twitch, I'd stream with like a 3 or a 5-minute delay, and it was just not possible to interact with the chat at all or anything, so we'll see how this goes. Thank you for leaving comments and stuff. I'm constantly, you know, making changes and stuff as I go, but streaming is definitely not my day job. Turns out wrangling OBS and doing streaming stuff is pretty complicated, so I have a, I guess, newfound respect for streamers. It's really difficult to set this stuff up well. I guess something to note about today is that it is a weekend, and usually Eric puts in the slightly harder problems on the weekend because people don't have to go to work the next day. We're still pretty early in the month though, so I don't think day 4 is going to be particularly tricky, but we'll see what happens. There might be some interesting parsing or problem solving going on, but we'll see. Not too concerned. Just gonna try to not write bugs and read through things a little more carefully. Not too sure why my editor is doing this. This is kind of annoying. Wait. What does the input actually look like? Oh god. Oh, I didn't have to do this. I don't know why my Vim is broken. Oh, we are not leaderboarding today. Oh, I see. Like this. It would. Oh Lord. Overlap at all, right? The 3 has to be within this. Either this is within this, or oh, I guess it's the other bound, right? I should have this. It could be something like this. So this will return the same result, but this is a bigger number. Oh, it actually, it knows to wait out my delay or something? Okay. Okay. The question is, did I do this correctly? I think we're live again, but I can't tell. I'm pretty sure I'm broadcasting right now to the correct thing. Yeah, looks like it. Okay. So we just jumped into the future 1 minute. Unfortunately, today wasn't so well. Missed the leaderboard on both parts. I think for some reason I got confused. I thought after looking at this that the input had the elves split into 2 parts when they were really on the same line. But let's go over the problem, and I'll remember to zoom in and try to zoom this stuff in. I'm gonna try a new thing where I just code it from scratch while I'm going through stuff and not make use of all my helper stuff. I don't know why my Vim is like leaving weird artifacts when I type stuff. But anyways, so let's solve this problem. So camp cleanup, something about elves. On each line, you get 2 elves, and you're given the regions of the camp that they're cleaning up. So for example, on this line, you have 1 elf cleaning areas 2 to 4, and another elf cleaning lines 6 to 8, or that section of the camp. And so you have that for many lines, and part 1 just asks for which of these pairs of elves does one elves like zone completely encapsulate the others. So in this case it does here. You can see 3 to 7 is totally within 2 to 8, and also in this one 6 to 6 is totally within 4 to 6. If there's a partial overlap, it doesn't count, and of course if they're not overlapping at all, it doesn't count either. So let's do something like this maybe, and yeah, that should work. Okay, let's code this from scratch. So the way that I usually like doing stuff is using the file input module. Okay. Basically, all that does is reads in something from standard input or a file from the first argument you pass in on the command line when you invoke Python. So if I do for line in file input dot input and do print line, and then we're going to invoke this with day 4, and my script over here automatically downloads this to inputs/4.txt. So I'm just going to pipe that in, 04.txt. It'll print every line in the file. So what do we have to do? The first step is we need to parse out these numbers. This is where I was struggling because the utility functions I was using, I had an option to ignore negatives. Basically, I have a thing to basically pull out numbers from the line, but unfortunately, this gets detected as like a -4 rather than 2, 4, 6, 8. It's just an implementation thing. I had, as you might have saw, I had an argument to pass in to ignore that, but I couldn't do it because I was using properties on that class. Something I have to fix later. But how would we do it without, fanciness? Well, we know the structure of this line, right? We know that there's elf 1 and elf 2. We can say that we're gonna strip the white space from this line and split on the comma. Oops, that is not a comma. Like so. And so if we print elf 1 and elf 2, and we run this, we've basically split these strings, right? Now we can, I guess, pull out the numbers, and so those are separated by hyphens. So you could probably just do something like point A and B, I'll call the start and end zones of the first elf, is going to be int, we have to convert the string of the number to an integer. So int x for x in elf1 dot, and then we're going to split on the hyphen character, and a very similar thing here for the second elf. So now if we print A, B, C, and D, we have the numbers, and these are actually the numbers and not just string representations of the numbers. So the task that we have to do is figure out if either elf1's zone fully contains elf2's or the other way around. And the way that we can do that is we don't necessarily need to I guess one naive way you could do it would be to say like, hey, let's go through the range of numbers from the start to the end of one elf and make sure they all fall between the start and the end of the other one, and like loop through and test every number. Well, you could do that, but you actually don't need to. You can just compare the end ranges. And so there's only 2 situations where there's a full overlap, right? If we look in this case, 3, in order for this to be fully contained in here, this number here has to be less than or greater than or equal to this, and less than or equal to this. Because if it were less than 2, you know, it wouldn't be contained in this zone. And if it was greater than 8, it wouldn't be contained in this zone. So we can do that check for one elf and also do it for the other elf. So let's sum up our part 1s, and we'll come back and do part 2 later. But we'll keep this around because having parse the elves is kind of useful. Maybe to make things cleaner, we can just no, we'll just do it all in line, it's fine. So how do we do that? Well, we can say if, so we'll do one test first, right? We want to see if this number, which is C, is in this range, and also if D, the end of the second else range, is in this range too. So if C is less than or equal to, if A is less than or equal to C is less than or equal to B, and also D falls in this range as well, we will add 1. That's like a valid elf. But we also have to check, you know, the other way around, because it could be the case, like in this example, this elf, elf 1, is actually contained in elf 2. So we do the other check. We make sure A is between C and D, and we make sure B is also between C and D. And then we can just print out the result of part 1. We run this again, and we get 644, which is the answer here. You know, nothing special there. So part 2 is kind of similar, but it says it seems like there is still quite a bit of duplicate work planned. Instead, the elves would like to know whether the numbers of pairs overlap at all. So rather than being completely contained, we want to know if there's any overlap. So how can we test if there's any overlap? Let me just quickly do this. So this is solving part 1. Now we can solve part 2 here, I guess. And so what does that look like? Well, these don't overlap at all, clearly. Oh, I heard a noise. 2 to 4, 6 to 8 don't overlap, and 2 to 3, 4 to 5 don't overlap. But this example overlaps, right? The 7 here, they'll touch. Over here, there's clearly an overlap, like 3 to 7 is fully contained in here. So what does this comparison look like? Well, we basically want to check if this range, if this number falls into this at all, right? So I think actually, thinking about it, it's basically this comparison, but we don't have to check that both the start and the end will fall into this start and end. We just have to check if one of them does, right? Because that implies that there's a full overlap. So this and changes to an or, this and changes to an or, and we make these part 2s. I believe that's right, but then again, I did not leaderboard on this problem, so let's try this out. Oh, I didn't even refresh the page. The answer was 926. Yeah. So in order to check if there's any overlap at all, either this number has to be within this range, or this number has to be within this range, you know, or this number has to be within, oh, sorry, let's find a different example. This number has to be within this range, or this number has to be within this range. You kind of visualize it here, right? This is an example where they're not enclosed, but there is overlap. And so the 4 here falls between the 2 and the 6. And also if we checked here, the 6 falls between the 4 and the 8. So yeah, that is day 4. Kind of messed up due to my utility functions. I probably need to make some adjustments on that so I don't run into that situation again. And also actually pay attention to when I download the inputs, trusting what I see. And yeah, so that's day 4. I'll be back again for day 5, of course, but something interesting I do want to check now and go back to the leaderboard here. Okay, so here's something interesting. this isn't a call out or anything, but just something kind of interesting to point out. So in day 3, these two solutions by Ost Wilkins and Max60, and then Ost Wilkins actually came through and was second place on day 3 as well. These these users aren't trying to hide it, right? They have come out and claimed on Twitter and like publicly admitted these solutions were actually generated by GPT-3. This is, if you've been seeing on Twitter, like the chat bot that you can interact with and gives pretty realistic answers. You can actually ask it, write me a Python script to do this. And in their cases, what they're actually doing is passing in the entire problem text of the question and seeing if it comes out with the correct answer and if it does submitting. So that's how we got an answer of within 10 seconds here and 30 seconds here. In the past, in like day 1s and 2s, where you might just be able to guess what the problem is and have a bunch of different programs prepared to do it, we've seen pretty quick answers, like between 30 seconds and 1 minute. If we go back to, for example, day 1, Nim actually has uploaded on the subreddit their solutions for this, and this was legitimately coded. So a 30-second answer for part 1 and a sub 1 minute for part 2, which is very impressive. But something to note is that these answers here were actually generated by GPT-3. They weren't read by the human or anything. And I was curious whether it would be possible for that to happen on day 4, today's day. And it looks like it was. Max60 doing a similar thing, getting a 16-second answer in part 1. Interestingly, though, taking 2 minutes here, and Ost Wilkins came through with second place here. So 117 for part 1 for Ost Wilkins, and then part 2, maybe they just coded it up here. It's hard to say, but anyways. I don't particularly think that this is a massive problem for the leaderboard, especially because I anticipate that as the questions get harder and time goes on, it won't be a feasible thing to do this. But again, it'll be a really impressive tech demo if later questions are possible to be completely AI generated. My only concern is that a lot of the leaderboard ends up turning into the sort of hundreds of people running the same script that just brute forces the problem text, generating code and seeing which ones fit the samples. That would be a bit unfortunate, and I think a little against the spirit of the competition. But for now, it doesn't seem to be a problem, so I'm okay with it. But yeah, thank you for watching. I have some work to do revamping how I use my utility methods.